Hi everyone, I'm Jack Thremling Raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well. I'd like to talk about Dead Dead Girls by Nekesa Afia, which is an excellent debut novel. It's a very, very effective mystery set in the Harlem Renaissance. It's the first of what I certainly hope will be an ongoing Harlem Renaissance mystery series by Nekesa Afia, starring our protagonist, Louise Lovey Lloyd. And it's a very, very good crime novel. Now, it's set in the Harlem Renaissance, not self-consciously. There's not all these weird name checks to try and make sure that we have bizarre, realist verisimilitude going on, but it feels like the Harlem Renaissance. And I'll share a passage later that I think kind of evokes that sense. But the reason it's such an effective crime novel is at its center is a protagonist, Louise Lloyd, who gets why crime is actual horror. It's not sexy or clever or anything like that. It is the loss of life. It is the, a future that's cut off. It's hopes that are destroyed. And that is what our protagonist senses. She's roped into helping sort of be an unofficial, adjunct detective to a series of crimes that are being committed by a serial killer in 1920s Harlem. All of the victims are young black women like herself. And so she can go talk to a black family in a way that a white detective can't. And she can talk to the young women her age in a way that the white detectives can't. And so she's brought in, but there's never a sense of thrill of the investigation, that she's solving a puzzle, and that there is empowerment, but it's empowerment in terms of her decisions. When she's actually doing the investigation, she feels sick to her stomach. She feels awful. She feels anxious because she recognizes that any one of these women could be her, or could be one of her younger sisters. And so that, or could be her girlfriend. That sense of loss is what makes it such an effective crime novel. It's a book that confronts that and doesn't flinch from it. It doesn't try to make things more thrilling. It doesn't try to make things, more exciting. There are thrilling and exciting scenes. Some of them are on dance floors. They're not necessarily these thrilling chase scenes involving, a young woman and the people who very firmly want to kill her. So as an example of that, she's crossing the street now, turning the collar of her coat to the wind, the residents of Harlem passing her by. They all seem to be in the same rush, wanting to get home and out of the cold. The stove will be nice. She's going to sit in front of it until her face is glowing from the heat. After that, maybe she'll read, or perhaps write a letter using the new fountain pen in her pocket, which she bought earlier in the day, or maybe someone grabs her from behind, a pair of hands that seems to have come out of nowhere. She tries to pull away. She slams her elbows back, kicks hard. Her hands ball into fists, and she turns to throw a punch, but it's too late. A raggedy cloth presses over her nose and mouth. The world spins. The buildings blur. After a few seconds, it all goes black. She won't be going home tonight. And that's because Louise Lloyd is kidnapped as a teenager. She does ultimately escape from that. That's the second page of the book, so it's not a big spoiler. She does ultimately escape on the fourth page of the book. Again, not a big spoiler. But that sense of at any moment this violence could occur to her, to those she cares most about, is on every page of the book. And it's why it's such an effective crime book. That said, we also do have our scenes set, during the Harlem Renaissance. Something about the booming band made Louise Lloyd feel alive, really, truly alive, in a way she had thought impossible. Sweat rolled down her back, down her face, sticking her hair to her cheeks and red lips. She didn't bother to brush away the strands as she concentrated on dancing. The strap of her dress fell, revealing her shoulder, and she put it back into place. She was panting for breath, her heart beating wildly. She let her muddy hazel eyes flicker shut for just one moment, taking one beat to reset. The Zodiac was the hottest club in the West 50s. Everything about it was the best. It had high sweeping ceilings, gleaming dance floors, and the best band in the city. And so we have the music bounced off the ceiling like some unbridled animal in heat. It was impossible to speak over it. The band was playing a song Louise particularly loved. And so we have these moments where we very much firmly feel in the 1920s. And the sensibilities are there. Louise herself is a lesbian who's not out. She has a girlfriend, and her girlfriend's brother seems to understand that the two of them love each other, but they're both in a rooming house. They don't have a place together or anything. And that's not the focus of the book, but that sense of being an outsider in more than one way, that she's an outsider as a black person helping white detectives try to solve a crime, in which all the victims are black. She's an outsider as a woman trying to help the police solve a crime in which all the police are men and all the victims are women. she's an outsider in terms of being queer. And so all of those different aspects come together to always make her feel of a moment with what's going on. She is the first person we've seen be almost a victim of an attempted murder. And so those associations always cause her to feel part of it. But that sense of being an outsider does create this sense of she's the only character whose head we're in throughout the mystery. And so that allows us to also feel this sense of being somewhat outside of what's happening and trying to piece it together with her. And it works to a large degree. There are aspects of it as a debut novel that are clear that some of the transitions feel just very abrupt and adjunct, particularly at the ends of some of the chapters, kind of in the middle of the book. But overall, it's very effective. And the mystery is very effective in terms of how it ultimately ends. I certainly don't want to spoil that, because this is one I hope others appreciate. But again, it really is working best because it's a crime novel written by a woman with a female protagonist who is able to provide that sense of authenticity and identity within the horror of the different crimes, in the same way that works like Dead Girls by Selva Almada or In a Lonely Place by Dorothy B. Hughes are able to provide that absolutely essential perspective in what is actually happening within any crime. Now, in terms of great Harlem crime novels, it would be remiss to not mention Chester Himes, who had a whole series of them. Cotton Comes to Harlem is a very strong one, but there are many. The Real Cool Killers, Rage in Harlem, All Shot Up, The Crazy Kill. Another great crime novel set in the 1920s, but on the other coast in San Francisco, is Hammett by Joe Gores, in which crime novelist Dashiell Hammett is sort of working at the very end of his work as a detective slash he's a writer, but he's not a very successful writer yet in this book, and so he's sort of brought in, as an adjunct detective on one last case type thing, and this is a fantastic novel. I highly recommend it. And as well, Devil in a Blue Dress by Walter Mosley, where we have the first Easy Rollins novel. And again, we have a black character who's not trained to be police, is not a trained detective, a professional detective, but is brought in to provide a level of access that, the establishment, the authorities can't have. And this is, of course, a great one. The way in which the crimes are against the young black women, who most of whom are dancers or they work at a nightclub sort of professionally and are viewed with absolute scorn and dehumanized by even the police, reminds me to a certain degree of the great horror novella Sagittarius from Ray Russell. And of course, the Harlem Renaissance itself produced plenty of great works. I have the Library of America Harlem Renaissance edition, Kane, Home to Harlem, Quicksand, Plum Bun, The Blacker the Berry. I would add that probably the sensibilities of Dead Girls were closest to Romance in Marseille by Claude McKay, but The Conjure Man Dies from Rudolph Fisher is sort of a great early black detective work. So let me know if you've read this fantastic book. I certainly am looking forward to Harlem Sunset. That will be making an appearance on this channel sometime in the future. And I hope everybody's having a great one. Thanks.